I really don't like Doom Eternal. Which is not something that I enjoy saying, because Doom 2016 is one of my favorite games ever. And even though the vast majority of the new gameplay changes are great, by far the thing that killed it for me was the writing and story. And already we have to stop. We're skipping past the rest of the fun intro, sorry, because we need to jump straight into the first argument, which is defending this video's basic premise, discussing the writing of a Doom game. So, without further ado, So, already you may be scoffing at me. Really? You're going to complain about the writing in a Doom game? Who even cares? Doom games are about a ripping and tearing, and the story basically doesn't matter. An interesting argument, echoed in countless internet threads and real-life discussions that I've had while making this video. But if the story doesn't matter, then it's a real shame that no one told id Software that, because there is a ton of story in this game. Cutscenes upon cutscenes, pages of codex entries, constant voiceover narration, and all of it terribly written. And one entire level that's just a glorified cutscene with a boss fight stapled on at the end. That's a lot of story in a game where the story apparently doesn't matter. So, I promise to stop caring when id Software does, but until that day... But more to the point, yes, the story does matter to me, because a big part of what made Doom 2016 amazing was the writing and story. From the injections of humor that helped keep the tone light, to the Doomslayer's wordless characterization, all of the incredibly badass moments, the amazing world building positively dripping with style and atmosphere, to the subtler, cleverer things that provided depth to the setting and characters. And for the record, I'm not saying Doom 2016 has, the best story in anything ever. In fact, let's go ahead and make my old English teacher proud and put my thesis statement here in the first paragraph. So, the TLDR of this way too long video is that if you were the writer for Doom 2016, with the same restrictions placed upon you, that I almost can't imagine how you could have done a better job. Essentially, that Doom 2016's writing is better than most people give it credit for, like an 8 out of 10, and Doom Eternal's writing is dog shit, like a 1 out of 10. And as someone who adored the first game, that massive quality difference frustrates the hell out of me. Don't worry, that's the only hell pun in the video. I cut the rest out. And like I said, Doom 2016 is by no means perfect, but you can go through the story with a fine-tooth comb, and while you will hit on some stuff to complain about, you'll also find that a shocking amount of work, way more than was necessary, went into making the world, the characters, and the story as strong as possible, which any given player may or may not have even realized. But to steal a Plinkett quote, you may not have noticed, but your brain dead. Sometimes when you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all, and Doom 2016's writing is a fantastic example of that. For instance, here's Hugo Martin, creative director on both 2016 and Eternal, perfectly explaining that in an interview he did with NoClip prior to his going insane a short few years later.
So the story has to just support that. And I think that was kind of the theme. I don't know if Marty talked about this, but like we saw it as like you're taking art, tech, and design and pushing all those things together to make a tight, cohesive, like tight as a drum experience. That's all about just being this killing machine. And the story really just had to support that. That doesn't mean that the game is dumb, because I think it's deceptively smart, and sophisticated. It's just easy to understand, which is honestly how things should be. I always compare it to like Apple products. With Apple, when it's at its best, my son is 6, he knows how to use an iPad. That's good design. So, yet that thing is obviously pretty sophisticated.
For example, I think one of my favorite moments of writing in Doom 2016 is the almost complete absence of it from the opening. From the time you hit start game, you get 10 seconds of narration and are then immediately flung into a fight. You then have about 60 seconds of talky bits to establish the bare minimum possible context, and then the game lets you loose. And barring a few lines of dialogue, or environmental storytelling, or Doomslayer character acting, or holograms you can walk past if you want, the game doesn't tell you what its story is until you get to the Vega terminal more than an hour in. I would still call that great writing, because the absence of writing, of dialogue and cutscenes and voiceovers, was still a writing decision made to support the creator's goals.
We purposely wrote that in a way that, like, right at the moment that the audience is like, ah, fuck this guy. And then Doom Marine's just like, whoosh, and just like, nice! I was thinking the same thing, And she says, we have to contain this, he could ruin everything. That's that subtle indirect storytelling, like just super lean, very, very efficient, ruthless efficiency. Like that was kind of like the motto. Like, say everything with as little as you possibly can.
Having a story-light first hour made it so that, in those crucial opening moments, there's nothing to distract you from getting into the rhythm of the gameplay. The writers hold back for as long as they can, making do with placing storytelling wherever it'll fit unobtrusively into the environment, and then when you finally get to the Vega terminal, at least as far as I'm concerned, they have earned the right to sit you down for 60 seconds and explain the plot. I will say, I do think this should have been a skippable cutscene, though, just for the people that really didn't care. The writing in a Doom game will ultimately always be playing second fiddle to the gameplay, but the writers of 2016 knew that and went with it. If there was ever something they needed to tell you, they did it and then got out of your way, and meanwhile snuck story in wherever they could, sprinkling in bits of narrative, characterization, environmental storytelling, and awesome plot beats that may have been good enough to make you sit up and pay attention, or to entice you off the path and into the expanded universe of the Codex. But the writing in Doom Eternal is almost the exact opposite. It is loud and obnoxious, constantly looking to leech time away from the gameplay to tell you a badly written story in as many words as possible. Which leads me to the last bit of criticism I would like to preemptively address here, which is, well, if you don't like the story so much, why don't you just skip it? I mean, there's no reason to care this much when you can just avoid all of it and enjoy the shooty bang bang. Well, first, I'll say that you can't avoid all of it. The aforementioned entire level of backstory and non-stop radio chatter aren't cutscenes and so can't just be skipped. But more importantly, the reason that I care is because Doom 2016 made me care. So, while you could just skip a lot of it, and maybe for some people that works great, I just can't ignore how awful all of the writing is, or every time they introduce an incredibly stupid new character, or make an old character I used to like act like an idiot, or flat out ruin some of the best moments of the last game. And I think this stuff is important to talk about. I know id Software can do better because they have done better. So while I will be saying a lot of very unkind things about Eternal, know that, as with the Slayer, my rage comes from a place of love, and I've only spent so much time on this project because I really want whatever they make next to be better, and that won't happen if we all just ignore the bad stuff.
I think you have to ruthlessly evaluate the art that you make.
Couldn't agree more, Hugo. So, now that I've made my case that the bad writing in Doom Eternal is worth caring about, let's finally begin by proving that it has that bad writing in the first place. And luckily, I know exactly where I want to start. Continued in Part 2. Special thanks to Mopel Galit, Logomorphos, Neo the Mighty, and Isaiah Christou.